Welcome to PHP Essential Training Series. I'm Mike King, your host, and in this tutorial we're going to talk about using arrays in PHP Part 2. If you watched the previous tutorial, we actually talked about the indexed and the associative arrays, and in this tutorial we're going to get into multi-dimensional arrays. A lot more to them. I thought maybe that we'll just make this a separate little tutorial covering just the multi-dimensional arrays. In the multi-dimensional arrays, it's an array in which each element of the array can also be an array itself. This is basically arrays that are containing arrays. And we'll go through a couple demonstrations inside our exercise files. They are used quite often in complex programming, so I want you to understand what they are. You probably won't use them yourselves for a while until you get very, very comfortable working with arrays in PHP or whatever programming language you're working in. But again, multidimensional arrays are something that are used quite often in complex programming in PHP. So we're going to go ahead and demonstrate them. They can be very complex. Let's move into our development environment and demonstrate some multi-dimensional arrays in PHP. All right, so let's drop out of our presentation and drop back into our development environment where we can demonstrate these multi-dimensional arrays. First thing I want to do, actually, we have our template loaded just as we've done in the past. I am still in the arrays directory inside my local host. I just want to go ahead and do a save as on this. I'm going to save this as arrays_4.php, and then I want to go ahead and change some titles so that we know what we're doing with this particular example. I'm going to go ahead and copy this from my text document in my H2, which is right there. I'm going to go ahead and change this as arrays in PHP. This is multi-dimensional arrays. And then right below that, I'm going to put the H4 that we had in the previous example. We'll come right down below that H2. And I'm just going to put in multi-dimensional arrays. Let's go ahead and save that change. Refresh our browser window. And now we can see the multi-dimensional arrays that we have that we're getting ready to talk about in here. All right, so the first thing we want to do, now with multi-dimensional arrays, we talked about having an array inside of an array. So the first thing I'm going to do, let me go down here and show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to go ahead and create an array called users. And this is going to be equal to an array. And I'm going to have my opening and closing parentheses, and then I'm just going to end that with a semicolon. That's how I actually set up the initial array. But now what I want to do is I'm going to come inside of here. Oops, before we do anything, we have to have our PHP tags, or this is not going to work. I knew that didn't look right. There we go. And I want to come down below that and close out those PHP tags. That looks a little better. Now I actually have this array that I generated that's going to hold my users. Now what I want to do is inside of that array, I'm going to generate another array. So I'm just going to come to the next line. I'm going to type array, my opening and closing parentheses. Let's come down a couple lines, put my semicolon there. Or I should say, I'm sorry, my comma. And then let's go ahead and actually put some things in this array. So inside this array, the first thing I want is a name. So I have name equals, and then I have the name itself, and my comma. Then I'm going to put a level in here. So I'm going to come down right below that, paste in a level, and I'm assigning this gentleman an admin level. And then I'm going to come right below that, and I'm going to put in an email address. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and copy this array, because I'm basically going to do the same thing again, probably 2 or 3 times actually. Because now what I want to do is I want to put another one. I'm just going to put Mike Jones. Because then what we're changing is the actual data. And normally this would be acquired from a login database or something along those lines. I'm just going to put M. Jones. So we have different data. Let's go ahead and save those changes. So I've actually created an array that's actually inside of another array. Here's my initial array with my opening and closing parentheses. And then in there I have an array that stores one user and an array that stores another user. And the way we can confirm this is let's do the same thing we've been doing throughout our demonstrations. I'm going to come down right below where I've created the array. And I'm just going to put in my echo for the pre-tags. Then I'm going to use a printr function inside of PHP, and I'm going to print out the values inside my users array. So let's go ahead and save those changes. refresh our browser window, and you'll notice now I have an array, and at location 0, at index 0, I have another array inside of that with a name, level, and email, and at index 1, I have another array inside of that. If I were to add another user, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, come down, oops, I want to make sure I'm outside of that array, although I could add an array inside the array, but we're not to that part. We're not to that area yet. Let's make this one Kimberly Smith. And we'll just leave it as guest, and we'll have K. Smith. Save those changes, and now when I go ahead and refresh my browser window, now I have index 0, index 1, index 2. Remember how we talked about that numeric index being 0-based? But we actually have 3 arrays inside that initial array that stores 3 different users. If I actually wanted to go and find a particular value, let's come down here. Let's say I wanted to find out Kimberly Smith's email address. I could actually do that by doing this, echo, and I'm going to say, let's say Kimberly, oops, put this thing in quotation marks, either single or double, Kimberly Smith, I just did that to correct it, it does make a difference, Kimberly Smith's email, and because I'm using the single quotes, I'm going to have to escape that. Kimberly Smith's, let me go put my other quote back up. Email address is, put my colon there, then I can actually put a concatenation symbol, and I'm going to say, because remember we're in the users array, so I'm saying users, then my square brace. And I know based on this value that it's in number 2, email. So I want to go to index 2 email, and that's going to give me Kimberly Smith's email address. So I'm going to say number 2, and then inside my square braces again, I'm going to say email. And then I'm going to end that with a semicolon. And that should pull up Kimberly Smith's email address because I'm going into the first array, index number 2, which is right there, and then the email variable inside that index. So let's go ahead and save the change, refresh our browser window, and it says Kimberly Smith's email address is ksmith@gmail.com. And that's exactly what it is. We went into our array based on the index and then the email and pulled out that particular piece of data. A lot of times when I'm setting these up, I'll actually set them up where this actually works off an associative array also. Because I mean, you can set that up just like you would set up the associative array we set up on the inside. But a lot of times people will use it just by the index numbers, because what they'll do is they'll associate that index number with the user's ID in the database. And they can go deeper than just 2. I could actually have arrays inside of these arrays. I could have an array with, say, all the different levels, and you could select that from a drop-down list. Or I could have an array with different items that were available in the game, and you could select that from a drop-down list inside the user. So you've got a good overview of how arrays work in PHP. We've looked at indexed arrays, we've looked at associative arrays, and now we touched on multi-dimensional arrays. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to drop me an email. I'll be glad to answer your questions if you have any. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. I hope this actually answered your questions on how arrays work in PHP. But again, I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it.